Hi, I'm Tyler, the Gallery Interpretation Manager at the Museum of the American Revolution. I wanted to tell you about some of my favorite objects in the museum, objects that have a special connection with today, April 19th. It's our museum's birthday. We opened on April 19th, 2017, but it's also the anniversary of the shot heard round the world and the battles at Lexington and Concord, Massachusetts that began the Revolutionary War in 1775. In one of our galleries, just past the Liberty Tree, we have on display 5 small rocks. They look something like this: gun flints, about an inch long, that were used in flintlock muskets to create the spark that fired those muskets. They're from Concord, and I wanted you to imagine how they ended up in the museum by putting yourself in the shoes of Massachusetts militiamen on the morning of April 19th, 1775. Imagine yourself standing on a hill overlooking the Old North Bridge. The night before, the British had departed from Boston, advancing into the countryside, looking to seize secret stores of American armaments. You've turned out that morning to protest your rights as a British American. For years, you've been advocating for your rights as a subject in the British Empire, and now you have a critical decision to make. Along with dozens of other militia soldiers, you're waiting for the British to arrive at that bridge. And are you going to advance into battle, fight the soldiers who are the representatives of your king and your government, or are you going to return home? When those men decide to go into battle, they remove the old, worn-out gun flints from their muskets, drop them on the ground, and replace them with new, sharp ones, guaranteeing that their muskets will work effectively in the battle. I want to read to you about what happens next from Robert Gross's The Minutemen and Their World. To the fife strains of the white cockade, the provincials proceeded, in double file, toward the bridge. With the same solemnity, Captain David Miles said, as in going to church. Isaac Davis's Acton Company was in the front line, followed by the Minuteman units of David Brown and Captain Miles. As they marched, David Brown passed right by his own house. The house was now deserted. In that remarkably warm spring, the grain already stood green in his fields, and the apple trees were beginning to blossom. All that Brown defended lay about him. The British were trespassing on his home. Every one of the Minutemen could have said the same. As the Americans advanced, the 3 British companies hastily crowded at the east end of the bridge. Some redcoats tried briefly to pull up the planks. When the Americans grew near, the British fired a few warning shots, then a direct volley. Their balls whistled well, said Amos Barrett. Isaac Davis and his company's young fifer, Abner Hosmer, fell dead. Major Buttrick leaped into the air, shouting, "Fire, fellow soldiers, for God's sakes, fire!" The cry of "Fire! Fire!" flew through the ranks from front to rear. The resulting discharge wounded nearly a dozen of the enemy, 3 of them mortally. The provincials pressed on to cross the bridge. The British, jammed together at the end, panicked and ran, unpursued, toward town. The Concord fight, the shot heard round the world, had taken 2 or 3 minutes. That shot heard round the world, fired on April 19th, 1775, started the Revolutionary War. Those militiamen had become revolutionaries. The gun flints they dropped, meanwhile, remained on that hillside, overlooking the Old North Bridge, until 1934, 159 years later, when for the first time anyone could remember, that field was plowed and it was turned over. And there, still scattered in 2 orderly rows, people found almost 100 gun flints. At the Museum of the American Revolution, we display 5 of those flints, thanks to a loan from the Concord Museum. And they're some of my favorite objects because they're a shadow or a footprint of a decision that everyday people made on this day, on April 19th, that changed the course of world history. If you have other favorite objects at the museum or stories from the Revolution that you'd like to hear about, we'd love to hear from you. Get in touch with us online and at AmRev Museum.